All right. So, welcome to Lawyer Horror Stories. I am the Boozy Badger. Let me run through my credentials and disclaimers before we get going, and I'll tell you what to expect, okay?
Will there be swearing?
Yes. I am a licensed attorney. I am not your attorney. Okay?
That means don't ask for advice.
That's right off the baseline. Let's make that very clear. I am licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and admitted to the Eastern District, Western District, and Middle District federal courts of Pennsylvania, as well as all trial and appellate courts of the state. I am admitted to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals of the United States. I have been admitted pro hoc vice into the Southern District of West Virginia for one very specific case. And somebody had said, why don't you apply to the United States Supreme Court? And I said, because I'm never going to argue in front of the United States Supreme Court. That's just a nice piece of paper to hang on my wall. So I'm an attorney, I'm not your attorney. The way that we intend to do this panel is I'm going to open you up to questions. You can ask questions about the practice of law, lawyering in general, anything like that. I will respond with some rambling, long answer. I will pretend that I've answered your question whether it did or not, and we will move on. One other thing that I have to say, because I am up here saying I am a lawyer and I am licensed. I'm not in private practice anymore. You can't hire me. I work for the government now. So the opinions that are expressed during this talk are mine and mine alone and do not represent the official positions of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Do we all understand that?
Yes.
I love it. They gave me a disclaimer to read when I told them I was going to the furry con to talk about law. Your tax dollars at work. I submitted that and somebody got paid to review it and send me a disclaimer. Yes. I have not seen one.
Cool.
So with that said, does anyone have a question?
Lost and found at Pops.
Because the way that everybody else says it, oh, we have a bunch of stories. Yeah, I have a bunch of stories, but like, do you really want to hear about adverse possession and eminent domain for an hour? No, you don't. Yes?
So let's say you ended up working for the government.
I got really lucky. What happened, I went to law school at a time when jobs were not easy to find for attorneys. During the Great Recession, a lot of people who left their relative employments or were coming out of undergrad looked around and said, oh shit, there's no jobs. Guess I'll go to law school. And then they graduated law school, and after several classes got hired, the rest of us coming out went, oh shit, there's no jobs, and I already went to law school. So I grew up in my father's firm in Kentucky. And my father has been a solo practitioner for about 40 of his 45 years of practice. So my initial thought was, well, I'll just open my own law office, right? And I did. I went out, I opened my own law office in the living room of a half-double that we lived in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania. Schuylkill County has a lot of clients. Like I was doing criminal defense, domestic work, and estate planning. And those three put together in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, I was never at a want for clients. Clients who could pay me, however. That was the rub. So I ended up in Pennsylvania, they have obviously public defenders. They also have what they call the conflict list. And the conflict list is a list of private attorneys that when the public defender's office has a conflict in representing somebody, the court goes down the conflict list and you get a nice letter from the president judge that says, congratulations, you've been assigned to defend this case. So I did that for about a year, and then in my prior office, they were hiring for an associate. I went in, I worked with that office for about 9 years. And then last year, the pandemic really hurt private law practice. And in that office, I was the sole litigation and trial attorney. The other attorneys we had were bankruptcy attorneys and transactional attorneys. And during the pandemic, we realized about 80% of the firm's income was on my desk, which means 80% of the firm's cases were on my desk. Law practice took a big hit during the pandemic. Several large firms actually shuttered their doors. Luckily, I had enough cases going that our office was able to stay open. But I was burned out at the end of it. And a friend of mine from law school had been working with the Pennsylvania Office of General Counsel, which is basically the civil trial attorneys for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And they had a lot of people jump ship, and he contacted me and he said, hey, we're looking for trial lawyers in your area, which is kind of like one of those ads that you get on the internet, you know, hot singles in your area. Looking for hot litigators in your area. I clicked on it and sent in my resume right after I got home from AnthrOhio last year. By the end of July, I had been appointed by Governor Wolf to my position.
Wow.
The pay went up a little bit, which is always good. You get to work remote, but the biggest benefits that I say when I get asked, and I did very recently, last month I was in court for one of my judges, because my new position, I have a weekly court list. We call it the bread and butter stuff. But they're minor bench trials. Bench trial is just a trial with the judge. There's no jury. They're minor bench trials, but there's so many of them, we put like a dozen of them on a court list, and you show up at 9 a.m. and you and that judge are together until 4:30 with those cases. And I've known this judge for years. It's in the county I used to practice in, my old office was. And he said, how do you like the new position? And I said, Your Honor, I get paid more. I get to work at home 2 days a week. I got one client, and I leave the office at 4:30 every day.
Yeah.
It's paradise.
Yeah.
Plus, I have a pension now. I have a government pension, which means after 25 years, I can retire. Which means for the first time in my adult life, I want to live to be 68. And the funny thing is because the pandemic really did hit private practice, and like it slammed down. We came out, when the courts came out of the pandemic, I should say, and everything reopened. You know, the pause on foreclosures, right? For a long period, if a mortgage was backed by a federal program, the mortgage lender could not proceed with a foreclosure action during the pandemic. They couldn't remove you from your home. So what happened was banks stopped filing foreclosure actions. Well, when banks stop filing foreclosure actions, there's entire law firms. That's all they do. There was one, Phelan, Hallahan, Diamond, and Jones. They were a huge foreclosure firm in Philadelphia. I say were, because they don't exist anymore. They did not have, even the size they are, without the banks sending the cases to them, they didn't have enough cash reserves to make it through. So they closed, their lawyers went elsewhere, and that happened with a lot of firms. Some smaller firms got caught up by bigger firms. Solo offices closed down. And that didn't just affect like foreclosures, bankruptcy firms. What I said earlier. The vast majority of the firm I was with, if it wasn't trial and litigation work on my desk, it was bankruptcy work on my partner's desk. And we had no bankruptcies for 2 years because nobody could be evicted. Why would you file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy? And our specialty was very complex bankruptcy litigation. Nobody needed a complex bankruptcy lawyer during the pandemic. Criminal defense lawyers stayed fine. Hell, some of them actually had more business coming out of it. But it was a whole thing. And as that wound down, I got my position because people were leaving the government office. Why? Well, as they were coming out of the pandemic court-wise, the government was telling lawyers who've been working fully remote, hey, we want you to come back into the office now 2 days a week. And a lot of the people who had retirement time said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to take my retirement and I'm going to take my 30 years of experience litigating for the government and I'm going to go work as a partner at this firm over here fighting you all. And there were a number of lawyers that did that. There were lawyers transitioning into private practice. We had a lot, especially in Pennsylvania, a lot of attorney generals, a lot of the attorney general's attorneys. During the pandemic, the attorney general never went remote. Their office stayed in the office, whereas the general counsel office, which is the civil side, were the state's civil attorneys. Attorney generals, the criminal attorneys were the civil attorneys. The general counsel side went full remote. And a lot of the assistant attorney generals said, you know what's a really good idea? Going to work on the civil side where I don't have to put on pants in the morning. So coming out with us having more time in the office, a lot of the assistant attorney generals are now putting in for transfers back to the attorney general's office. So it's a huge mix of things that got me in there, but the best answer, I was tired of being underpaid and the pandemic hit. Next question? Yes?
If you weren't going to be a lawyer, what would you have been?
If I wasn't going to be a lawyer, what would I have been? Oh, this is a fun one. Because I did not immediately make a decision to be an attorney. Like, I didn't come up and be like, I'm going to be a lawyer one day. My dad did not give me Black's Law Dictionary in the room. As a matter of fact, when I grew up, my father, all of us worked in his office at some point in time. I'm the only one he never fired. My brother, my sister, and my mother all got fired from my dad's law office. But my dad would look at me at least once a week and he'd go, don't be a lawyer. Like on Take Your Kid to Work Day, I'd go into the firm with him and he'd be like, yeah, take your son to work. So the IT guy down there is going to show you how to work a computer. Just listen to him. This was like back in the late 80s, early 90s when like being the IT guy meant you were the only person who knew how to touch the on button. So when I went to college, I was studying journalism at first. And I went to college for a year, and then something happened. And that something happened was somebody flew 2 planes into the World Trade Center. And I had a rethinking of my priorities vis-a-vis my career opportunities. I dropped out of college is what I did. And I went to go work on riverboats for a few years. I worked on the oldest operating stern wheel steamboat in the United States, the steamer Belle Roval. I was her crew chief. I worked on towboats over the winter when the Belle wasn't running. I was a deck boss on those. And then one day I said, I'm tired of working for a living. I'm going to go back to college. So I went back to college and I began to study psychology. And then after 1 semester of psychology, I switched to history, and when they asked me why, I said, because I realized that if I'm going to deal with people's problems, I want them to be dead. I don't want there to be any expectation that I'm going to help. So I did that. I got my degree in history. I graduated. I actually went to go work as a health insurer. For a health insurer, I was the final appeals representative of the company. I went to the administrative law hearings. I reviewed all appeals. I was doing that while I was working on a master's in history, with the plan being that I would then get a doctorate in history, and I would teach history. Then I had kids. And there was a professor visiting my focus when I was working on my master's was the Palatine Exodus of the antebellum era into the southern Appalachian mountain range, 1820 to 1850, which was, to put it in, German immigrants going into the southern Appalachians from 1820 to 1850. And that's how specific that got, with a minor focus on the socio-political collapse of the Soviet Union. And my professor, who was guiding me on my Soviet studies, was from Pittsburgh, actually. And we were talking in his office, and he said, your papers are wonderful, you understand the subject matter, let me ask a question, do you want to be poor? I went, well, no. And he said, okay, well, maybe go to law school. So I went to law school. And It's a good fit. I did grow up in my father's office. I always had liked the law. I liked the research. I like kind of the nuances of it. And over time, I realized I actually do like this. So, if I hadn't been a lawyer, what would I have been? A steamboat deckhand? Or a poor academic? Yes?
How did you meet Uncle Pocket?
How did I meet Uncle Kage? Okay, this is fun. The sovereign citizen furries. That's the short answer. Who knows what a sovereign citizen is? For the people who aren't raising their hands, a sovereign citizen is somebody who essentially believes that their relationship with the government is contractual in nature, and therefore they can reject that contract and live under natural law. Therefore, they don't have to pay taxes, do not have to get driver's licenses or license plates. They don't have to recognize legal authority. And my favorite one is, and we used to say, is in the Court of Admiralty, that they would insist that U.S. courts did not have authority over them because the gold fringe surrounding the flag is representative of a Court of Admiralty, and therefore, since they are not on the high seas, they cannot be tried by said court. It is pseudo-legal argument. It's a bunch of things cobbled together by somebody who wants to get out of a situation or a situation. I actually have had a few in my legal career. In private practice, I used to say I kind of feel sorry for them because most of them would not wake up one day and say, I'm going to reject all common sense. They were in a situation where that theory sounded good because it could help them get out of the situation. If you're about to lose your farm to the bank, you want someone to tell you you're not going to lose your farm. And they'd come to me, and I would look at it, and I'd go, you're probably going to lose your farm. We can fight it, but you're probably going to lose your farm. And then they would go to some guy that they saw on YouTube, and he'd go, here are 10 secret tricks to rule that the court doesn't have any authority. And that's obviously the one they want to go with. The people I really got mad at were the people who would promote that to them because it's giving false hope to folks. And it was at the time that the events that we're about talking to occurred so common in my district that our city and federal judge had outside of his courtroom in my division a one sheet. And on the top of the one sheet he had written in marker, "Sovereign citizens read this." And it was a listing and summary of all of his court decisions where he had thrown sovereign citizens in jail for contempt for making those arguments in front of him. So I was writing a blog called Lawyers and Liquor at the time, and it was just a kind of discussion topic on legal topics, weird laws, things like that, things about the practice of law. And I had no topic for, I think, a Tuesday. And I was in a nationwide lawyer chat at the time that we called the super secret lawyer chat. No lie, we're not original people. And one of them said, "Hey, Boozy, have you seen this?" And they sent me a Twitter post of a convention that is no longer in existence, sending a cease and desist letter to someone who was criticizing them that was very sovereign citizen. So I went, oh good, weird shit. And wrote a post just deconstructing it and scheduled it to post and went on about my day. And the next day I was sitting there in court arguing, and this is back when I still had Twitter notifications turned on. And as I'm arguing, my phone just kept doing this across the table. As tweets start, like the notification, I'm going, oh shit, what did I do? So I finish my argument, I get back to court, I open it up, and the furries had found me. So of course I had fun. And the whole time I'm going, this has got this is a flavor of the week thing. the giant animal people will be soon. That was 6 years ago. I've got invited to a furry convention. I gave a talk much like this one at it. I went home and AnthrOhio said, Dr. Conway would like to speak with you, and I responded, who the fuck is Dr. Conway? Pardon the language, I don't know if there's anybody, but who is Dr. Conway? Is this supposed to mean something to me? I don't know this. It's like, he's an esteemed chemist, and I'm like, he looks like a twig. So they had said, if you would like to see the world's largest furry convention, we would like to extend an invitation for us to show you around the furry community. So I went out to Pittsburgh, it's 4 hours away. And somebody I had, the part I love about this is there's another lawyer I knew that I'd always refer to as Captain Eyebrows, because the man had just magnificent eyebrows. And I just want to let you know, like, the Bar Association, they thought this was hilarious. Like other lawyers who knew what was going on, they thought this was hilarious. They're like, yeah, he's got animal people following him now. Like it got so bad, no lie, that the reason the Boozy Badger Twitter account exists is other lawyers contacted me and said, hey man, can you do something about this because the furries are following me now? In large numbers and responding to posts that my clients are seeing. And it's a little weird to have like, did you know you could avoid a Chapter 7 bankruptcy if you follow these 3 methods of challenging a contract? Oh, no, this is your unsolved. So I created the Boozy Badger Twitter account and just kind of said, please follow me over here. I've got colleagues here. And that happened. And then it became my primary Twitter account. A bunch of lawyers started following that when I started getting messages from furries that said, hey, we've got a bunch of lawyers following us. Could you do something about it? To get back to that, so I go to AnthrOhio, and I'm there, and they brought me up, and they're showing me, as everybody's getting ready for the fursuit parade, this little excitable man in a white lab coat comes over, looks at me, and goes, who are you? And I go, oh, who the hell are you? I am Dr. Conway. I'm like, oh, hello, Dr. Conway, you still look like a twig. And then that evening we had drinks, and it turns out that we had a lot to talk about. And I went to a few more of these. It was Indianapolis that same year when we were sitting there having a drink, and he looked at me and went, my boy, I have a feeling that you've always been a furry. You just didn't know what it was called. And at this point, I brought my family to some of these things. And I'm like, let's enjoy it while it lasts, because at some point, they are going to get tired of my shit. And I called my spouse. I said, honey, apparently we're furries now. And we always have been. And my spouse said, oh, sweetie, I figured that out in May. But that's how I got it. And to be honest, I wouldn't trade it. Genuinely, since being involved in the furry fandom, I'm happier. I was just a miserable person in 2017. I really was. I was miserable. It's nice to get away every now and again, look around and realize I'm talking about nuclear physics with a 7-foot-tall fox. Next question. Yes, over here.
Speaking as someone who's the son of a lawyer as well, do you feel growing up that you had any unique experiences that were just because you were the son of a lawyer?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I grew up, my father is an old Southern lawyer. And I say that and you're like, I know what you're thinking of. I'm just a simple country lawyer. I don't know much about these city files. No, my dad went to Harvard. My father worked his way through Harvard Law School. My father is, and I say this without a modicum of humility, my father is the smartest person I've ever met. to the extent that when he had a heart attack and the staff was kind of talking down to him, he was getting upset. Like, he wasn't getting upset then, but he was getting upset. And finally, we actually had to have a talk with his doctor. He said, we need you to understand that when he says things like, when the staff is baby talking to him and he's saying things like, I went to Harvard, please don't talk to me like that, he's not delirious. He graduated at the top of his class, like the top 10% from Harvard Law. He's a very intelligent man. He's just not with it right now because he just had a heart attack. But my father used to take me to court with him on a regular basis. And it's strange, because this is when you can do that. It's strange to be under the table while your dad is negotiating a compromise. Or you're in court and it's an off day from the schools, nothing else is closed. So you're in court with your dad. And the judge's kids are back in the chambers, and all of a sudden you and the judge's kids are now playing back in chambers. Like most of my friends growing up were judge's kids and other lawyers' kids because we saw each other constantly. The other experience that I love, and I will tell this story, is Dad used to tell us that if we ever got arrested, don't call him. Now, in my wilder and younger days, I did get arrested. Much like that person may be experiencing. Did I miss the Pentecostal church meeting on this? Somebody's been touched by the Spirit back there. So in my wilder and younger days, I did get arrested. And it wasn't for anything amazingly serious, but just a 21-year-old being stupid and doing what 21-year-olds do. Alcohol may have been involved. All right? My father was on a golfing trip with 2 lawyers and 2 judges that he had been friends with for years. And when you get arrested in Jefferson County, Kentucky, I'm curious. When you get arrested in Jefferson County, Kentucky, they take you to an area of the lockup called court services. And what court services does is they decide whether you're going to be ROR, released on recognizance, meaning we don't need a bail, you don't need to go to the judge. We're going to let you go because we trust that you're going to come back. And they assess everything about you. Do you have a job? Where do you live? Do you have family in town? Things like that. And if they decide we're not going to RR you go in the lockup until there's a judge available. So it is a Friday night, Louisville, Kentucky. I'm being processed. And I get over to court services. And they look at it and Bootsy Badger. Are you related to Mr. Badger, the lawyer? And I looked at him and I went, no. And as we're going through the thing, they're getting my employment, they're getting all this information. And somebody must have said, no, he is. Because a supervisor from court services came over and said, here's the deal, sir. Right now, we don't think we should ROR you. You know, you work on the river. Your address is a cheap apartment in this part of town. We don't think there's a whole lot that would make you come back. If you got on your boat and ended up in New Orleans, we don't know why you wouldn't just break your lease and stay in New Orleans until this fell off the record. So if you call your father and have him confirm who you are, we will let you go. We will ROR you. You can can go home tonight. If you do not, the judge will not be sitting for arraignment until Monday morning. And my father, cell phones weren't amazingly common then, but my father had one. And I weighed those options. And then I looked at the lady and I said, ma'am, with all respect, put me in the cell. And they did. They did. However, the lady in court administration actually called my mother, who called my father. So 24 hours later, after one night in a jailhouse bologna sandwich, the guard came over and said, there's somebody here to get you, your bail's been posted. And I'm thinking, well, who the hell posted my bail? Nobody knows me here. And I walk out and my dad's standing there. He walks me out to the car and I start to get in the car and he looks at me and goes, what are you doing? And I said, I'm getting in the car. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, your apartment's 10 miles that way. Start walking. And off he goes. And when I showed up for my arraignment, my last name is very easy to mispronounce. Let's say if my last name is pronounced Badger, and everybody around you may go, Badger, okay? And I grew up just regular hearing, even with judges, my father would say, Mr. Badger, and my dad goes, Badger, Your Honor. And correct them right off the bat, just a matter of course. So we go, my father's standing beside me at the arraignment. And the judge goes, and we have Mr. Badger here for Mr. Badger. And my dad goes, yeah, that's right, his name's Badger. That's why I knew I screwed up. But those are experiences that you don't have. A lot of people, if they're in that, you're not going to have that experience and it did kind of impact it. Does that mean lucky? No, obviously not. Court administration did not treat me differently in that situation. What they said was, we reviewed everything else. We think that you're going to not show up for court. If you can tell us, if you can establish with us that your father is an attorney, we're pretty sure you'll show up for court because we're pretty sure he'll kill you if you don't. But I did my time on that one. My sentence ended up being, I went into what's called a diversion program. In Pennsylvania, we call them accelerated rehabilitative dispositions. And it is, we will drop your charge if you fulfill all of these conditions. And my charge, being alcohol related at that point in time, had certain enhanced conditions. One of those conditions was I had to do 150 hours of hard labor for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And when I say hard labor, I do not mean community service. I do not mean walking around picking up trash on the side of the road. I mean I showed up in a rural county on a Friday afternoon. A sheriff's deputy handed me a sledgehammer and a pick and said, we are going to be breaking up this road through the woods this weekend. The camp is halfway. This was August. I put in 150 hours of hard labor for the Commonwealth. My case ended up being dismissed, and I have gone forth and sinned no more because, oh my God. And I actually would tell that story to clients, but I'd have clients who'd show up, and they'd be very embarrassed about whatever situation they're in. I tell them, I go, you're in a situation I've been in before. You know, my goal is not here to shame you or to judge you, it's to get you through this as best as possible. So, life experience. Huh? Do we have another question? Yes?
Why a badger?
Why a badger? Alliteration. At the time, I was writing under Boozy Barrister. And I like alliteration, so I had said in the article, I said, if I was a furry, I'd be a badger. You know, Boozy Badger. Sounds nice, right? And then afterwards, after I accepted that this is my home now, then I always joke about it, but no, I'm here of my own free will. But I immediately was like, well, I should probably know stuff about badgers. So I'm reading through all these traits of the American badger. I'm like, oh God, it fits. So I kind of lucked into that one. Another question? Don't be shy. Yes?
Just a really nuanced question. Why didn't they just take that road out with the tractor? Did they specifically make that road?
They specifically reserved that for the hard labor.
Ah.
I mean, that's the, I had the same thought, like we could have a jackhammer, or you could do, and now in retrospect, I'm sitting here thinking, no, the Commonwealth specifically reserved that for hard labor. Like that was a road that had to come out anyways, and the Commonwealth probably said, we're going to make this as difficult as we can on you. No, I'm good. Which actually leads to something, because it's not uncommon for that, to be honest. Even where I am now, there's jobs that can certainly be done easier when you're doing community service. There's things that can be done smarter when you're doing community service. To some degree, some of these jobs, though, they hold out there for people to do community service. Be it organizing files, or as several former clients of mine had to do, replanting flowers on a government-owned care facility. Things that, the people could do, but you have to have people perform community service otherwise. And why? You're not going to find any lawyer who has done criminal work who is against the concept of giving people a chance to clean their slate. One of the keys of any of that type of work is people make mistakes. Do we always need to punish them as thoroughly as other people would want? No, because you sometimes have to recognize it. People make mistakes. I made a mistake. I'm a licensed attorney now. Not only that, because I'm a licensed attorney, I can think offhand of at least a dozen people whose lives would be more difficult if I hadn't been representing them. And that's not tooting my own horn. That's just saying, when they hired me, I knew that area of law well enough that I could get an outcome that some other people may have thrown their hands up at. Or because of the nature of our practice, we had our rates at a point where they could afford us, where other attorneys looking at that case would not have taken it in the first place. You should always give people a chance to change. And if that means that sometimes they have to break up a road in August in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, sometimes they have to break up a road in August in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Any other questions? Because we still have another half hour. Yes, right here with the answers.
At the start, you mentioned working during the pandemic. Any good pandemic Zoom stories?
Actually, yes. Yeah, I had a hearing. It was a type of hearing that was open to the public. Okay, because most court hearings, whether you know it or not, most court hearings are 100% open to the public. And if you ever want to get a good feel for how the court system works and you have a day off, call down to the court or go to their website, see what arguments or hearings or things like that they have listed, and go sit in court and watch. You'll see how this operates. You can do that. Other types of hearings, obviously close to the public. Most family cases are close to what we call domestic matters. Are close to the public just right off the bat. Abuse cases, when the victim is under the age of 18, close to the public. A lot of estate and guardianship matters, close to the public. But a lot of things you just go and sit there. So I had a hearing, and it was scheduled over Zoom. And, well, it wasn't Zoom, it was a Zoom-like client that the court used, that our courts used. And the way that it took place is obviously the judge is on. I'm in my office and I'm on. My client's at their home and they're on. The lawyers for party one are on. Party one's on. The lawyer for party two's on. Party two's on. They're swearing in. We're taking testimony. And it was a civil dispute between two people who had formerly been a couple and weren't anymore. And it wasn't a domestic matter. It was just a civil dispute. And I'm vague sometimes because I can't not be vague. Right? And I had a large amount of documentation that the opposing party was going to get up there and lie their ass off. So, we're going through the hearing, and it's their burden to make their case, and the opposing party takes a stand and they testify, and then it's my turn for cross-examination. And once again, I dispense with humility when I say I'm really good at cross-examination. That's one of the things I'm very good at, and ripped them apart. Just, you said this, yeah? Well, let's take a look at this document. You recognize that? Yeah, let's take a look at this one. You recognize that? I'm putting it up on screen share and send them to the court clerks. And the judge, bless them, we close evidence, and the judge says, do you have a case? And I'm like, no, Your Honor, I think we're good. We rest it. And the judge said, all right, well, I'm going to deny their motion. And everybody have a nice day. So we all log off, right? And my client calls me, and he says, I just want to let you know, everybody over here thinks you did a great job. And I said, oh, well, then what do you mean everybody over there? My client had put the hearing up on his big screen television and called his friends over to watch. Like it was the Super Bowl. And he told me this, and I said, maybe let me know you're going to do that next time. I don't really need to say anything. These matters are open to the public, so it's not an issue. And 3, did any of them ask for my card? And he said, oh yeah, all of them. I'm like, good. Caddy's getting an Xbox. We're good. I know a lot of lawyers had issues with those during the pandemic to the extent that it was the Florida courts actually had to put out a memorandum to attorneys practicing for them, telling them what not to do on Zoom. And the list included things like don't smoke cigars during the hearings on camera. You cannot prosecute your hearing from the pool. Please get out of bed before signing up. And the judges expect you to wear appropriate attire. Which everybody interpreted as, oh, some lawyer in Florida got caught without pants. Yeah, there was one that I read that I loved. It was a lawyer who had a hearing, an evening hearing in front of one of the night judges. And they logged on to Zoom, and in the middle of the hearing, they broke out a wine bottle. And the judge just said, is that a wine bottle? Yes, put it away. So there was actually a very neat series. The United States Supreme Court does not allow photography. It doesn't allow video recording. It doesn't allow photography. It just got to the point where, not too long ago, where you could listen in to the arguments. They do an audio stream of the arguments in front of the United States Supreme Court. So the way that you would see what was happening in front of the Supreme Court is there would be a courtroom artist there making sketches of the arguments, right? And during the pandemic, when the arguments in front of the United States Supreme Court were done via telephone conference, one courtroom artist went to the offices of lawyers arguing in front of the court and sketched their arguments from wherever they were. So there's guys who had set up like the lectern and the podium, and they had like 9 mannequins with Supreme Court Justice face taped to them, and like they're standing there arguing. And there's guys who are standing up in their basement and going through the whole thing with a headset. But my favorite one was a lawyer in Texas, because it was just him at his desk with cowboy boots on the corner of the desk and his socked feet just resting on this, leaned back with the mouth, and just going, oh, that's how I want to argue cases from now on. It did really change a lot of the practice of law, the pandemic in general. When the courts are closed, the court offices are closed. And when the court office is closed to the public, how do you file things? we have e-filing in Pennsylvania, but it's not mandatory e-filing. Each county doesn't have to allow you to file documents electronically. And if they don't, then you've got two ways to file stuff: via mail or walk it to the counter. Take it into the prothonotary, which is more or less a Pennsylvania-specific word for our civil clerk. Take it to the prothonotary's office and file it over the counter. That's it. Well, if you don't have e-filing and the office is close to the public, that only leaves mail. Well, they don't go by the postmark date on when it's filed. They go by the date they receive and process it. So what happens if your filing deadline is in 6 days, but the mail's delayed and it doesn't get there until day 8? You've blown your filing deadline, even if you dropped it in the mail with what would normally be plenty of time. So they started having operations like you would walk up to the courthouse and they would have a lockbox in front of the courthouse that said prothonotary filings. And you drop them in, and at the end of the day, they'd go out and they'd empty that lockbox and they'd process them as received. They treat it as received the moment it went into the lockbox, which actually isn't a new thing. Before the federal courts allowed e-filing, they had the same thing. You had to file at the counter at the United States District Court Clerk's office, or you had to file by mail. Okay? But the federal courts have allowed filing by day, not by time. It's not when the clerk's office closes, it's was it filed that day. So if you filed something on May 1st at 11:59 p.m., it was filed on May 1st. If it was filed at midnight, it was filed on May 2nd, and it was untimely. And why is that important? An untimely filed document doesn't get considered. It's done. It's over. You don't get to consider it. This convention, my client gave me authorization to draft something called a motion for reconsideration on Friday morning on an order that a judge entered on the 18th. Those have to be filed within 10 days of the order because the court only has authority to reconsider its prior order for 30 days. And if they don't reconsider that order within that 30-day period, then the order is final. And you're outside the appeal time frame now. So the way that evolved is the Supreme Court says if you want to ask us to reconsider it, you have to ask us within 10 days of the order being entered. Otherwise, we're not going to reconsider it. You need to file an appeal. So when they gave me that authority, if the order was entered on May 18th, what is 10 days from May 18th? It's math. This isn't a trick question.
28.
The 28th. The 28th is tomorrow. Now, there's a rule of court about the calculation of time frame, saying like, if you have X many days to do something and the last day falls on a weekend or a holiday, then the last day moves forward to the next regular day of court business, which would be Tuesday, right? So Friday, my client says, yeah, I filed this motion for reconsideration, which we're probably going to win. We had a good argument on it. I get that at 9 o'clock Friday morning. I'm here. So this morning, if you didn't see me around, it's because I was in my hotel room drafting a motion for reconsideration. All right? So I can file Tuesday. But let's say that the last day was Friday, and I sat in there, I finished that, and then I sent it to my law clerk saying, I need you to print this out, append my signature, and get it to the courthouse. All right? If my law clerk shows up at the courthouse, at a federal courthouse at 11:59:59, before we had e-filing for those, there would be a postal box sitting in front of the courthouse. A U.S. postal box, normally painted black, emblazoned on the side with the words United States District Court. Then somewhere on the bottom, do not tamper with the United States Marshal Service. And you would get there, and I had to do this for my father a few times, run stuff down to drop it in the box at the federal court at the last second. And you would get there at 11, and you could watch it happen too. Cars would pull up at 11:50 and just keep pulling up until midnight. And about 11:55, a United States Marshal would unlock the door of the courthouse, walk out, and stand right beside that box. And in one hand, he had a master lock, and in the other hand, he had a box. And the second his clock hit midnight, he would lean over, slap that lock on the top of the box, unlock the back of it, clear out everything, and walk it, take the lock back off, and walk back into the courthouse. Why? Because at midnight, it was a new day. And that's how they're telling the clerk, everything in this box was filed yesterday and can be accepted as filed yesterday. Anything not in this box was not filed yesterday. There's a fun story. I was running something down to the court for my father once, a brief or something along those lines. Once again, this is all back before we had e-filing. Now, when you e-file it, it timestamps it. And the federal courts actually require e-filing now. So, but I ran something down and I got it in at like 11:55. And right across the street from the federal courthouse in Louisville is a White Castle. So it's 11:55 p.m. I go, I'm going to go get White Castles. So I drive across the street, I get White Castles. I'm in the parking lot, I'm facing the courthouse. And I watch the marshal come out and stand there. And I watch when right at 11:59 a car pulls up. And you can see the guy frantically grabbing stuff in the car, and he opens the door, jumps out, starts hoofing it towards the box, and he was maybe a foot away from the box when the marshal leaned over and slapped the lock on. And that was the difference between malpractice and not. Because you blow a filing date like that, that's malpractice. That's that lawyer, or if he was a runner, that runner went back to the office the next day and said, we need to call our malpractice insurer. We need to notify them because we missed the filing deadline. So yeah. Next question? Yes? Say what? But a client's so dumb intentionally, yeah. I've had cases where, like I said, we did some complex bankruptcy, and every now and again, my partner roped me into the complex bankruptcy proceedings because they touch on non-bankruptcy areas. And I had one of those cases where in the course of trying to save their property, a client left a voicemail that for somebody else that may or may not have indicated they were trying to convince this person to lie. And that voicemail ended up in the hands of the United States trustee, who is the person who oversees the bankruptcy proceedings. And that's when they said, well, how bad is it? I said, it's, charged by the Department of Justice with bankruptcy fraud, Dad. And that's not uncommon, though. Like, somebody told me, you told me that, I'm like, nobody will be able to identify that person from that statement because that is not the only time that's happened in the last year, much less the last, 12 years. That actually happens pretty frequently. People tend to not understand the consequences of their actions. And unfortunately, many times, by the time they are understanding the consequence of their actions, it can't be fixed. Who do we have under 18 in here? Okay, good. I get to use my saying. I had a saying, especially during criminal consults, where somebody would come in. If it was a criminal matter, we never sat out front. I always brought them back in the conference room. I closed the door for the talk. And I discovered very quickly that it helps if you're very plain spoken in these consults. And it was not uncommon that somebody who just was in a horrible situation would say, so how are you going to get me out of it? And my response would be, I'm not. There's no getting out of it. To be crude, you're fucked. I cannot unfuck you. I may be able to make it so you're slightly less fucked. Because you don't do people any favors. Crude or not, you're not doing anybody any favor by promising them an outcome that's not realistic. You're giving them false hope. And the other thing I would always tell people, well, so-and-so, this lawyer told me that I can do, that they guarantee me this outcome. I said, well, any lawyer that's guaranteeing an outcome to you is lying to you. Because you can't guarantee an outcome. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen so much that it can actually be unethical to guarantee an outcome. And if you want me to promise, to tell you that all these great things could happen, yeah, I will. I want to let you know that they could happen. It's a really slim chance they do, and quite frankly, I'd rather not sugar shit right now. I want you to know how bad your situation is so you're realistic going in. And if you don't like that, you do not have to hire me. So I think we have time for one more question. Yes?
So, during discovery, you get to read all sorts of stuff, try to find juicy details. What is the most interesting document or type of thing that you've gone through for discovery?
Sincerely, because we would every now and again be representing or suing businesses, and thankfully I work for an institutional client now. And institutional clients are very good about watching what is in and out of emails. Businesses aren't so good, and I need people to stop sending their dick pics through company email. I have seen far too much genitalia in official communication manners. That's probably the worst, to be quite frank, is people, here's a rule of thumb, and take this with you, okay? Who here has a business email account? Who here has a business phone? Never text or email anything in those that you do not want somebody looking at in a lawsuit. Never. Number one, you don't own your business emails. You don't own anything on your business phone. Your company owns all of that. There's court cases on it. Number two, once it's reduced to a written format, if I ask for all of your, in discovering a lawsuit, and I think you're connected somehow, and I ask for all of your emails from this period to this period, your company doesn't get to pick and choose. They can only withhold under a valid objection or an exercise of privilege. Most of the time, they won't pick and choose. They will send me everything. And the other side will see whatever you have said. Never email or text something that you would not be comfortable having to read from the stand in a courtroom. And with that, I think we're done. Folks, I'm Boozy. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Silver Gato Man, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gato Man, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gato Man, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.